Welcome, everybody, this afternoon. My name is Adam Newman. I am co-founder and managing partner of Tyton Partners, and thrilled that you are taking time out to join us this afternoon. We've got a great group here. I'm going to, in a second, turn it over to allow them to introduce themselves briefly, and then we're going to leap right in. This is a conversation we had the good fortune of starting last year. It's been a very busy year. It's been, in some places, a tumultuous year, and other places, a very exciting year. And so I think part of what we're going to do today as we think about choice and the different dynamics is understand what's sort of happened over the last 12 months, and also maybe looking forward, how do we continue to sort of maintain and continue to fine-tune programs that offer tremendous potential for students in their communities. As we start, one thing I would love to do for our panelists here is just get a sense of who's in the room. So if you are someone from a district, school district, any district folks? Thank you for being here. If you are a provider, if you're a microschool, if you're an alternative education provider, supplemental academic service provider, okay. If you are an investor, someone looking to try to understand this space. And there's a whole bunch of people who didn't raise their hand. Are you just a general policy and advocacy person who's interested in this space? Research, there we go. Okay, so we've got a pretty diverse group. So with that, I'm gonna turn it to Sarah, to my immediately to my right. What everyone's gonna do is take a minute to introduce themselves, their organization, and sort of how they intersect with this choice work today. In about 60 seconds, we'll go all the way down, and then we'll come back and we'll start a bit of a conversation up here and hopefully work to save some time at the end for questions from the audience. Okay? Sarah.
Okay. Oh, we're on. Okay, 60 seconds. So my name is Sarah Raybon. I am the Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives at ClassWallet. ClassWallet is a financial technology company. They have a purchasing and reimbursement platform that helps public agencies maximize the impact of the funds for the people they serve. So basically in the ESA space, what we do is make sure the money gets to the right person, the parent, and is used easily by the right, or easily used for the right purpose, which is to educate their child. Before joining ClassWallet, I was at the Arizona Department of Education, where I worked to administer our state's ESA program, including through the launch of Universal ESA. I'm also an ESA parent. I always like to say that because I'm a mom of 2 little boys in the ESA program in Arizona. So I like to always say that I have I can wear a lot of hats: the admin hat, the advocacy hat, and also the hat as an ESA parent.
So my name is Joe Connor. I'm the CEO and founder of Odyssey. We're a platform that helps states automate school choice programs. Started the company after a decade and a half in K-12 education. I've worked as a teacher, a school leader, started my own network of schools, and was also an attorney advocating for some of the very early private school choice programs that came out in the 2010s. And so really started the company with the idea that the most important challenge for private school choice programs is on the implementation side. And so at Odyssey, what we focus on is making sure that the programs are super accessible to parents. So we have novel technology like real-time identity verification that allow parents to instantly find out, are you approved or not for a program? And that's allowed us to have record-setting enrollment in states such as Iowa, where we help run the Iowa Students First program.
Thank you. I'm Whitney Marsh, Director of Policy Operations with Yes Every Kid Foundation. Similar to Sarah, I formerly worked in the Arizona Department of Education, but my career has been in implementation of education policy at the state level for the past 15 or so years. So started in the governor's budget office, doing school finance, and so now in my role at Yes Every Kid Foundation, really work to help states operationalize these education freedom policies. So recognizing it's not just enough to design a new innovative policy that allows for access to education opportunities for kids that meet them where they are, that we also have to help states find new ways to implement them to ensure that these policies, when they get passed and turned into programs, they're easy to sign up for, easy to use, and meet the felt needs and desires of families. So to do that, we do polling and research, talk directly to families to hear about what they want from them. And then we, like I said, work directly with the administrator to help implement the program. Thank you for having me.
I'm Adam Peshek with Stand Together Trust, where I lead our K-12 work. Stand Together Trust is a philanthropic organization, and our involvement in ESAs, in addition to just supporting the concept, we do a lot of grant making to policy organizations, as well as kind of the supply side of the market, particularly around investments in organizations and supporting organizations that are helping spur this kind of crop of emerging school models that we're seeing across the country: microschools, hybrid schools, some of the different types of approaches that are kind of blurring the lines between homeschool, private school, public school, all of that kind of stuff. My background is in education policy. I've been working on education policy probably for about 15 years. Prior to this role, I led the advocacy team for a national education advocacy organization, and I, back in the day, drafted a lot of the ESA bills before they got to the level that they're at today. And so I've kind of seen it early on when this was just an idea that advocates were pushing for, to kind of some of the early test cases, and now funding a lot of the groups that are focused on this on the ground. So thanks for having me.
I'm Ryan Delk. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Primer. We help top 1% teachers launch Microschools. So we've built a tech platform that handles everything from the state level regulatory requirements all the way down to the curriculum and the actual learning experiences for the kids and family interfaces, sort of like Tesla Autopilot, but for running a school. Primer was rooted in my personal story. My mom started one of the first microschools in Florida way back when. When my wife and I got pregnant with our first kid, I wanted my kids to have a similar experience that didn't exist. So I started Primer. We go to war on behalf of our teachers and families to try to make it easier for microschools to exist and get started. So we've changed state law in Florida twice. We really try to take on a lot of the hairiest challenges on behalf of the teachers that are trying to start microschools and make it easier for them, with the goal of having hopefully tens of thousands of new microschools in the U.S. over the next decade.
Awesome. So as I think you can see a pretty diverse array of perspectives here. Where I'd like to start is oftentimes it's easy to forget where we are in the arc of time. All of you in different ways, as you shared your background, have a lot of experience and exposure to sort of this idea of choice and alternative models. So maybe I'd love to hear some thoughts on where are we right now in the arc of the choice movement? Are we still at the beginning? Are we at the middle? Are we at the end? And given where you think we are, what are you most excited about? And or what concerns you, or what keeps you up at night as you think about where we are? Adam, I'm looking at you because you offered that you'd written some policies way back when.
I mean, in the adoption curve, I'd say we're probably, if you think about innovators, early adopters, we're probably at the early adopter phase of education choice. I mean, I'd be remiss to not point out that, we're talking about policies that are largely giving funding to families to go and explore a variety of different education opportunities, and people have been doing that forever. So, a lot of this, honestly, the innovators in this field were the homeschooling families and others who were doing this, for decades and years before this was even an idea at the policy level. I think we're probably at the early adopter phase just because you are now cracking, to the point where now all families are being able to access these in ways that they haven't in the past. Early on, 90, like the first decade of education choice, 1990s, was really focused on low-income kids, students with disabilities. The 2000s was kind of still a lot of that, maybe some cracks into like middle-income families, but really only in the past few years have it really been kind of open for all families in the same way that charter schools or public schools writ large are open to all. These programs are now open to all families in ways that they haven't been before in at least a handful of states. Not all states, but 9, 10 states. So,
who wants to comment, build on that? What's exciting about where we are today? What keeps you up at night?
Well, I think I'd like to touch on what's exciting, and I think as we've seen these programs grow across the country, we're seeing, the increase of options for families. I mean, Arizona, it's had our ESA program we've had for over 10 years, and we are seeing such a tremendous opportunity and a wealth of options for families all across the state. I mean, I was just talking to Whitney and Joe earlier. I mean, there's a reason, we have, schools that serve special needs students in very rural areas of the state. I mean, we've got microschools and learning pods, and I think I'm excited to see as these programs go, those are going to become more accepted options and expand, even further. I was just talking to Ryan about South Carolina and possibilities there. So I just think that's amazing that we're living in a time where more families are having access, and as more programs come online, we're going to start seeing these just spread across the country.
And I could jump in and talk about what keeps me up at night is that there, yeah, a lot keeps me up at night. But related to this, it's really just that we're trying to do things in new ways that we haven't done before in education. Giving people money, direct cash for explicit use is not new to government. Like, we do it all day long in the other sectors and industries, but in education it is new. And I do always thinking about there are real concerns from families and lawmakers about outcomes and accountability and health and safety of students that we're trying to solve for, but we keep reverting to the same tools that we've used for decades that have resulted in this existing system that we have. So accreditation and other regulatory barriers on zoning or credentials that you have to have in order to qualify to participate in these programs. So trying to solve for those very real concerns and issues that people care about, but finding new ways of doing it, new ways of measuring, and doing some of that quality assurance is what keeps me up at night. Like, what can we learn from other sectors that we can bring into this space that makes people more comfortable? But because it's such a political hot potato, it feels like we're not able to reach across the table and learn from some of these other programs and how we can move it forward and really see out the vision, which is that we're doing that in a new way, that everyone has opportunity to learning options that really meet their unique needs and passions.
I think it depends on your perspective. School choice overall is about 3.5 decades old now. I come from the charter school sector. That was kind of one of the very first approaches to it. If we're looking only at ESAs and specifically universal ESAs, we're actually astonishingly early. We're not even, I think, at the 2-year mark for the very first ESA that became universal, which was in Arizona in 2022. And since then, we're about at a dozen states that have passed, implemented, or are running one. So I think in terms of kind of the second order effects of what ESAs will do to state K through 12, we don't really fully, I think, grasp that. I think some exciting things are what Sarah mentioned earlier, which are it really gives parents, for the first time ever in the US, purchasing power where they can actually vote with their feet, they can vote with their wallet, they can choose, hey, I want to go to the Primer micro school that's in Miami, I want to go to the Kai Pod that's in Tempe, I want to go to this online outschool class. And so I think what's going to be very exciting, and I think for anyone who administers the ESAs, you've already begun to see, is kind of a combination marketplace grow up of both national vendors who are serving people kind of across those 12 states and soon to be more, as well as a really robust local environment. So in some of the states that we administer, you see great programs, everything from after-school programs to music programs. Interestingly, in a bunch of the Mountain West states, actually, you've seen this new kind of therapy, I think, explode called equine therapy, which is very big in Arizona. And so those are the types of, I think, service providers that you could put 100 policymakers in a room together. They might not ever come up with it, but once you actually give parents control over their wallet and they kind of get to vote with, hey, I want to spend this money on my child this way, there's some very interesting things that come out of it that I think are relevant not just for this specific ESA sector, but for kind of all of K through 12, right? Private, public, charter. And so I think that's what is kind of really exciting. And you're seeing essentially kind of, not to get too grandiose, but you're seeing kind of the promise, right, of federalism in the United States, which is the idea that you can have a policy passed in South Carolina, you can have one in Arizona, one in Florida, Iowa. carried out 4 very distinctive ways. And then the hope is that kind of best practices emerge from that. And so I think we're at the very early stages of that because we're only about 2 years into universal ESAs, but I think it's very exciting.
Ryan, you've been quiet and you're basically on the ground enabling some of these innovative models. So what's, from your vantage point, what are you seeing that sort of gives you hope in the spirit of the experience you had, and what, I think you used the term going to war, right? So what does that mean in terms of what needs to happen, or what are the things that are, maybe not opening these opportunities up in ways that they might otherwise?
Yeah, I think everyone covered the exciting parts. The parts that aren't so exciting is that I think 95% of all the energy has gone to the demand side, so meaning the ESA programs, which is great. And those have gotten passed and they're growing quickly, and that's fantastic. But there's this whole other side of the equation, which is once a student gets an award and a family gets an award, where are they going to actually send their kid to school? And are there high quality options with seats available that they can afford in their area? And the reality is that most of these ESA programs are between $5,000 and $10,000 per student. The $40,000 tuition at Ransom Everglades in Miami, for most families, it's still completely out of reach. And so we need to have a lot of options that are very high quality, that cost between $1,000 and $5,000 a year out of pocket in addition to the ESA, and we need those to be ubiquitous. They need to be in every neighborhood in these states. And there's still just a lot of friction to do that. So in the state of Florida last year, 21 million people, on average for the last 3 years, 38 new schools, new non-public schools have started in the entire state of Florida. So it's in a state of 21 million people, 38 new non-public schools a year. The city of Miami, there's 176 locations, buildings, where you can launch a private school by right. That's it. That's a metro area of 7 million people. And so there's local land use laws, there's zoning, there's all sorts of things that make it very, very difficult to start new schools. And that's what I'm passionate about solving, so that a really great teacher who wants to launch a school to serve their community can go do that with minimal friction. And that's almost entirely regulatory friction right now.
So you raise a great point, which is, we've done some research. We actually published some research earlier today that focuses on actually the ESA programs in Arizona and Florida, and looks at the issue more broadly. And one of the things that our research uncovered is issues of access, right, and affordability, right? The two ones you just hit, Ryan, are real material challenges for this space right now, particularly as you look at income, right? So notwithstanding the promise, you started to talk about these issues of equity and access. I was wondering if other folks could talk a little bit about, in your experiences, what needs to happen to make sure that these programs are actually evolving and choice options are evolving on the supply side to actually meet demand for, low-income families all the way up to sort of the top of the income food chain.
I really love that comment, or that question, and I think it's something that I've been very mindful of. So I think we have focused for a long time on the importance of educating families, right? We're going to educate families, we're going to encourage them to apply for these programs, but then also I think we need to do an equal amount, or if not more, educating to providers, prospective providers, to make sure that they are aware of all of the nuances in the program, and that because often that they come in contact with these families, we want them to be fully prepared and equipped to educate them about the program too, right? And also to encourage other providers. I just think we need to do more in terms of supporting and educating our providers on that side.
And when you say providers there, Sarah, you just amplify that. Who are the providers? Like
it would be a microschool owner. It would be a tutor. It'd be an educational therapist, a private school leader, anybody that is going to be potentially serving the families. And then I think something that I've also just really want to just emphasize is also the importance of making sure that there is a strong support for families, particularly the lower income families. I see my friends at OutSchool right here. We worked really closely with them in the state of Virginia on a learning acceleration grant that really helped families connect with tutors. We really found that the lower income families struggled to find a tutor that would meet their child's needs. So in some cases, it's partnership with an organization that's going to be on the ground working with those families. I just think to really make sure that the low-income families access these programs, you just really have to be mindful of provider education and support.
I think in terms of access, policy design is really important as well. Not just who's eligible, but when can you apply? A lot of these laws make it so that there's a short application window that's not aligned to the school enrollment period. So in some states, it's June. I mean, Iowa, you ran the application process in June last year, right? Families have already made decisions. Private schools have already accepted students, registered them, went through the financial aid process. So making sure that when we're pushing a policy through the legislative process or making some of those compromises through negotiations, that we're always thinking about, like, how does this impact access for families that are hardest to reach? And so thinking about, like, when do they get the money? Is it reimbursement only? A lot of families cannot come out of pocket. And so it's not just, is it reimbursement only? It's also, how is it being implemented? Is the money moving quick enough so that private schools and providers want to participate in the program and accept money through the payment platform? Because if it's not, then they're going to say, sorry, families, like, you have to pay out of pocket and deal with the state yourselves. And so always looking back at policy design with that frame around access. Does this make it easy for families to sign up and use the money?
I'll also say, for a lot of families, low-income families too, if we're not making it easy for providers to participate, we're not going to make it easier for families to participate. I live in Atlanta, where they just passed a choice policy, a pretty minimal, small one, but so not a lot of choice funding for the schools. But during the pandemic, there was an educator in the local public schools who felt like her kids were not being served. So in June of 2020, she had this idea of, I'm going to go out here and launch a microschool. And by August, she had set it up and was serving 10 students. And then the next year, she was serving 30. And then now she's to the point where she's like going down to pre-K. And so that idea, that ability to go from idea to actually implementing in 2 months is pretty radical for government policy. And my fear, in terms of what keeps me up at night, is that that spirit might get squashed by well-meaning regulators or lawmakers who want to make it very difficult to enter the field. And you're going to crowd out all of those people who have a passion for doing this and have a spirit of trial and error, and they want to go out there and serve kids. But I don't think we want to replicate kind of the charter approach where, you need to have a 7-figure budget, you need to have a board of directors, lawyers, government backing, all this stuff before you even serve a single kid. So the more that we can help those educators who have a passion for kids actually go into the market and serve families. At the end of the day, I don't think parents care about ESAs. It's a word and it's a means to an end. 9 times out of 10, it's they have a provider that they want to go to. How am I going to afford it? Oh, there's this ESA that's available. But if we stop and don't let that provider to parent connection happen first, we're not going to be able to scale ESAs because it's going to be money to go towards nothing. And that's not what we want to do.
Yeah, that's. I think that's very accurate. In Iowa, what we saw was that typically schools were often kind of the first people to give information to parents about, hey, this is what the program looks like. Here's when it's open. Here's who's eligible for it. And so part of what we did very intentionally was to partner with those schools. There's 245 private schools in Iowa. We worked very closely and signed up about 190 of them, really by explaining what the law meant. There's a lot of concerns, especially on the provider side, about government regulation. And so that's actually a very big issue that any kind of first-time school choice program getting off the ground needs to address. So we spend a lot of time on the ground at conferences and other things addressing those issues. And I think one kind of really exciting thing that has come out of that is actually that a number of the private schools actually formed a nonprofit organization to open up more schools in Iowa. And so there's going to be an increase this year of at least 10% in terms of the number of new schools opening. And in a place like Iowa, which mirrors a lot of other places that have ESAs, there's a huge rural population. And so although the number of students who received ESAs was higher per capita in those rural counties, a lot of them actually ended up not being able to utilize them because approximately only half of Iowa's 99 counties have a private school that they were able to attend. And so I think a big part of this too is making sure that it's not just easy to access the actual software platform, but that it's easy for them to access a nearby high quality provider.
One of the things that's interesting is it sounds like we've got a lot of momentum on the policy side. Implementation sounds a little bit like a hot mess right now. And I'm curious, if you had a magic wand and there were one thing you could do to help streamline some of the implementation around the policy to accelerate some of the things you're talking about, because it sounds like everyone in the field is being asked to sort of do implementation. what's the one thing you would do? And Ryan, you're like totally going for the mic, so I'm going to go to you first.
I would have someone who's in charge from the state level. I would force them to go through the process of opening a school, and almost every issue would get solved within a week. We've had so many conversations. Perfect example is there's a state where the Department of Education doesn't require a certificate of use or certificate of occupancy, but they require a health inspection and a fire inspection to the standard of a school. And so the Department of Education, the Department of Education board members insisted on us, hey, we don't require a certificate of use. Like, I don't know what's going on. Why is there so much friction here? And they didn't realize that every city and county, every municipality in the state will not issue a fire and health inspection without a certificate of use. So they had a multi-$100-million ESA program where the people that were making these policies did not realize that they were sort of in practice requiring this thing that they explicitly thought that they weren't requiring, because no one had actually ever gone through the motion of figuring out how to do this and realizing that there was this gating function. And so there's probably 20 or 30 things like that if you just said, okay, your job for the next 6 months is to open a school, they would get fixed in a hurry.
Other recommendations? Wave a magic wand for implementation?
I think in general, to echo Ryan's point, governments have often struggled, I think, buying software or technology or in general vendors who are parent and vendor friendly. And so if I could wave a magic wand, I think it would be to have more of a focus on, what is the best platform that's going to enable the citizens of this state to be able to access ESAs and to really focus on what that user experience is. For those unfamiliar with kind of the procurement process, it's a little bit maybe backwards would be a kind way to describe it. But typically, if you are selling a software system to the government, you might never demonstrate the software to the government. They may never use it. And so what you're asked to often provide is a written narrative along with documentation of how it works. And so I think if I could wave a wand, it would be to actually have those government officials, before they purchase, to actually sit down, look at the software, utilize it, see what works, what doesn't. Because I think that, similar to Ryan's point, would cause many to kind of question, hey, should we actually go with this provider? This person, seems better over here. So I think that needs to be an important focus.
That's a good point. And to piggyback on it, working for government in IT and school finance and doing some procurements in other areas, noticing that, you're asking people in state agencies to go out and procure something. We build it into the law, like, oh, we don't want those bureaucrats to implement this, so you go do an RFP and hire someone who's going to be smarter, more sophisticated, more efficient at operating this program. So we put out an RFP and we're like, okay, we just ask for exactly what's in the law, which is usually pretty basic. Then the vendors respond and we enter into a contract, and we really didn't even know what we were supposed to be asking for or how to manage it. And the frame of mind is often, and I don't say this, like I worked in an agency, like I don't say it to beat up on people working in agencies. We're just trying to implement the law. We're trying to comply with the law, as opposed to what Joe is saying, is like looking at a program or a system and figuring out, like, how do we serve families? How do we make the experience the best for families? That's not the job that we've been given oftentimes. So if I could wave a magic wand, I think it would be change who the customer is. Similarly for the vendors, we convene the administrative vendors, the Odysseys and ClassWallets, and are always saying, like, treat the families and the providers as your customer, not the government. But the truth is, the government is their customer. That's who they have a contract with, and families can't walk with their money. If you want to use an ESA in Arizona, you have to use ClassWallet. In Iowa, you have to use Odyssey. So there's just this dynamic where we're trying to set up these family-first policies where it's, the family gets resources and then they get to go out and choose, but in the way that they're getting implemented. And it's not for lack of intention or lack of care. It's just the incentives are not aligned. And so figuring out, and we haven't cracked the code on how to figure out how to align the incentives, but that's what I would do.
Great. Okay. I want to save a few minutes for questions, so I'm going to ask one more question of our panel, and then we'll open it up in the time that we have left. We haven't talked about public schools at all, right? We've talked about a dearth of supply. certainly states like Arizona where everyone's eligible, like it's going to take us a while to sort of have that supply in place. How does the choice movement coexist with the public system? And what do we need to be attuned to over the next 2, 5, 10 years as we sort of make this transition into a new world so that we don't throw out the proverbial baby with the bathwater, right?
I'll start. Sorry. I think what is interesting about ESA, and there are so many different constituencies that are advocating for these laws for different reasons, but for a lot of us, we want to see flexibility, innovation, something new, and ESA allows for that, which we're hoping frees up public schools to try different models as well. In a lot of the states, public schools can be qualified providers, so they can turn around and sell their services to families that are using ESAs, and we're seeing that happen in states like Arizona, particularly with career and tech ed, which is really cool. There are a lot of families. I think we saw like 1,000 families in the ESA program in Arizona use their money at public schools for career and tech ed. And so I think the opportunities are vast, and the goal is not to eliminate the public system. It's to try out, pilot new ways of delivering, and hopefully public schools participate in that as well, because we see the majority of families in most places still are sending their students to the public school. The convenience factor, too, is huge, like having a one-stop shop. And so we're hoping that it's a yes and approach moving forward.
And I think I just would like to say, I hope we don't, again, Arizona, we have had robust choice options for decades. Our ESA is more than 10 years old, and we are seeing a lot of innovation even in the public school space. A lot of our public schools are doing really cool things, in addition to like the career technical, which is obviously something I always loved about our program and all of the kids benefiting from that. I mean, we have, a micro school in a public school district in Mesa, Arizona. So a lot of really cool things are happening, but it takes time. So I think that's the other thing, this hurry, hurry, hurry. While it hasn't happened yet, I don't like that, because it does take a little bit of time for these things to happen. It doesn't just happen overnight.
And I would add that I think there's a lot made kind of at a higher level about the distinctions between private, charter, and public. But if you do talk to parents, that's not how they view it. They really view it as, which provider, which school is right for my individual child. And even within a family, you will see some families where students are on the ESA, some where they're enrolled in the public school. I was just talking to a mother the other day in Des Moines. She's actually a public school teacher, and all 3 of her kids are on the ESA. So she clearly believes in public school education, but for her own 3 kids, what she said is that this is the right school for them. And so I do think that sometimes at kind of the macro level, we get really bogged down in that. But that's not necessarily, I think, what the customer or the parent always thinks about.
Yeah, great point. Ryan, Adam, anything to add?
No, I mean, ultimately, if we step back, ESAs are essentially just funding reform. Like, instead of building a school, drawing a circle around it, and putting dollars there, we're giving money to families and they're letting them go to multiple different schools. And so ideally, a lot of people view ESAs as like a binary choice between public schools and something else, but there's a lot of people right now, based on polling and anecdotes, who are leaving public schools because they can't get exactly what they need out of them. They might want some of it, but not all of it. And there's a grand opportunity where whether you're a public school or a charter school, if you leaned into it, you could own the ESA market tomorrow by providing services to families who need them. All these families who are experimenting with homeschooling, million-plus new families in the homeschooling, a lot of them are not just schooling around a table. A lot of them are going out there and doing different customized batches of education. Public schools are the biggest provider of education in their community, and there's lots of families who say, I want to take a science class, I want to take a math class, and be able to capture some of those dollars that are leaving you seems like a golden opportunity for public schools.
Excellent. Let me open it up to the audience. I've certainly got more we could ask up here, but want to see if there are questions. So I think the question, what are the risks for microschools in participating in the ESA programs? And then some illustrative examples of where microschools are thriving and what sort of the conditions are around that.
I mean, I can tell a few anecdotes. I know of a micro school in Chattanooga, Tennessee, that primarily caters to kind of neurodivergent students. They have a model, integrated model, where they have neurotypical and neurodivergent students in the same classroom. But and they're growing. Like, they went from 20 to 40 kids over, in a course of 1 year. And she was asked if she takes the ESA program, which up until I think maybe a year ago, it's still regional based. So if you're in Chattanooga, you get it. But she's decided not to participate in the program, even though that she has families that can benefit from it, mostly because the regulations are too high, it's too confusing, and the amount of kind of administrative burden. If it's hard for a private school with 400 kids, it's a lot harder for a micro school with 40 kids. And so that's one of the biggest barriers, I think, or one of the risks is micro schools or any schools taking their eye off the real customer and focusing more on government and philanthropic dollars as opposed to just complying with whatever they want. And that's, to me, the biggest issue that we should worry about is a lot of the micro school growth has been because it's been an educator who wants to provide something and a parent who's in need of something, and they work it out together. You add another body into that mix, and it kind of makes things a lot more complicated.
I think one micro school success story that I really want to highlight is one that is really near and dear to me. It is the first micro school on tribal land in San Carlos, Arizona. Started before COVID, in partnership with Prenda. Survived through COVID, and it was really challenging. It was tough. It was really tough. Survived through COVID. Is still serving families in San Carlos today, which is really exciting because, we realized we were talking about options all across Arizona tribal land, and really there weren't a lot of options for families in Arizona tribal land. We were telling them you have options, and then really, actually, there's one private school. It's usually full. There's no spots. Homeschooling isn't really an option. So what are we giving you? What really are we? We have this ESA. How are you going to use it? So the one I really like to talk about a lot is the one in San Carlos, Arizona.
One thing I would add real quick is there's a lot of people that are like teachers that are starting schools that only have classroom experience, and we really try to help teachers understand that they're becoming entrepreneurs when they launch a school. And when they have that DNA, amazing things happen. And so we had a school in Liberty City, Miami that was started by a woman. It had 30 students 2 years ago. It had 75 students last year. She'll have 160 students this year. And then she'll split next year and probably have a whole other micro school in parallel because she has that like entrepreneurial DNA. And so I think that distinction is really important and something we try to help micro schoolers get ramped up on.
Well, micro schools broadly will take a bunch of different approaches. I mean, if you're like a classical education micro school, you're typically going to have lots of, great book style exams and things like that. I've been in micro schools that are extremely tech heavy, where kids are being assessed like weekly, if not daily, because it's just integrated into their learning. Like, they're actively learning online, and they have kind of passive quizzes and assessments of their learning as it's happening. So I think the benefit is for each of these models, they're going to take a different approach, and they're almost an R&D lab to that extent. And so I wouldn't want to apply any kind of broad top-down thing on them yet. If we're talking about ESA programs, and like how do you hold ESA programs accountable, typically you can break that down into fiscal accountability, health and safety accountability, and financial and academic accountability. On the academic side, each state does a little bit different. I don't know how many. Most of them, I think, require like a norm reference test of some kind, where a family, you can take the state test, or you can take an Iowa test, or a Stanford, or any of the number NWEA. A lot of those require them to be told to the parents. So the main goal for a lot of those is to ensure that parents have data to be able to act on, is the first thing, and then what was reported to the state, there's a variety of different approaches there. Some roll them into a single report that kind of shows the health of the program as a whole, which I think is the Florida model. But it's all over the place, honestly.
I just add, I think if you're taking ESA dollars, you have a moral responsibility to take academic outcomes seriously. And so we see a lot of microschool leader providers that kind of try to shy away from that. And I think top-down approaches are probably heavy-handed right now, but I do think that it's something that people should take seriously if they're taking ESA dollars.
We are at time, so I want to thank Sarah, Joe, Whitney, Adam, and Ryan for being here today and sharing some thoughts with us. So thank you all. Give them a quick round of applause.